the next part of this session is we're going to open this forum for people to ask any questions. But before we go into that, I've got some specific questions for each of the panelists. So I'll step by step ask one at a time, and then I can open this forum to anybody else if they want to raise any questions. First, for Simon Bridges, you talked about this relationship, this deep relationship with India, specifically the issues that we are facing at the moment with tourism, with immigration, and with the trade. What is your vision or a vision of national party, and from a global perspective, from a high-level perspective with India?
Well, I think it's sort of this simple. I went to India with a pretty clear sense that ultimately it was a trade relationship, and that was what we wanted to see more of. And that part of that was because, as I say, I think we want to diversify in those areas. I came back with a much more nuanced sense that it's about much more than that, that it's highly desirable for our countries to be closer together for a bunch of other reasons that actually aren't necessarily just about trade. Now, I think a deeper relationship in a bunch of other areas would be good for trade, but I think it's more than that. I also came back with a clear sense that relationship, a bit like we've heard from FOMA, relationship is incredibly important, and relationship partnerships, they come before doing more in a trading sense. I just have a clear view. India is going to be one of the world's winners. That is in a population sense. I mentioned to you the youthquake that is there. It's clearly positioned in the action zone of the world and Asia. And all of the numbers, the figures push in the right direction to mean for our self-interest as a little country, we should be working very hard to get closer to India. I made the point, but I'll just make it again, so I think it's an important one. I believe the onus is on us. India is a heck of a big countries in fact, many states, 28 of them. And so for New Zealand, the onus is on us to get up to there to deepen the relationship, and a national-led government would do that.
Thank you, Simon. Liz, I've got a question for you. You spoke about how little or very limited knowledge in terms of interaction with India there is in the Maori business community. How do you think the platform like this will be helpful in leveraging that relationship and looking at getting more businesses from Maori community getting involved with doing business with India?
That's a bit of a huge question, actually. But I think ensuring that there are more Māori business people involved in these types of, summits, and you have it annually, is probably really important. I think possibly for Māori, particularly our primary producers, they've relied much on traditional market. And I think so there's a whole game change that's got to go on, and it is about the relationship building, frankly.
Thank you, Liz. Zubin, can I please ask you to just pick on those two global supply chain and logistic issues that you think we can raise today here, and what are the things that you feel will be relevant to look at resolving those issues from your perspective? And because the opportunity is right, because people from New Zealand opposition, government, and policymakers available here, why don't you raise those couple of issues that we can be looked at from your perspective?
The cases that I spoke about were challenging in nature given the commodities that were imported in India for the different product launches or making of equipments, final products for the end product that was to be delivered. The duties and structures that are existing in India are quite steep. This is what Simon also mentioned. So one of the challenges is understanding the duties and getting reduction in duties. The customs clearance is a challenge in India when you don't understand the different codes, the different documentations that are possible and that can help a customer to mitigate the delays. In case of the other example, it was more about cosmetics. Cosmetics has a different FDA approvals that you need from the government bodies. Now, those samples need to be imported into India on earlier basis. The samples need to be tested and given approval by the government for it to be imported seamlessly. Now, if the customers are made aware about how these things need to be imported into India, I think it's easier for an exporter or an importer to do business in India. There was a success story mentioned throughout the day, Glide Path. We are pleased to inform that Mondiale and Jeena did that success story for the Cochin airport, which was supposedly awarded as one of the best handling systems for luggage in the country. So that cargo was also moved by us, given in special containers, special equipments, and the duties and taxes concerning the state of Cochin. We had to do this in a limited time period that we had, and we delivered. That's it.
Thank you, Zubin. SHARNI, I've got a very quick question for you. You talked about the tariff and how to boost international trade. What is one specific thing that you think we should raise today to look at from your perspective?
Look, certainly from the perspective of a service provider and in that operational environment, I think it's about breaking down a lot of the complexities. So looking to align, our tariff schedules. If we are looking at RCEP, having the rules of origin, again, in alignment, given there are some overlapping of free trade agreements, and having the support there, the business support and tools, again, to be able to show businesses the how to, not only to understand those policy areas, but how they can actually maximise those tariff or non-tariff measures that are available to them.
Great. Carmen, can I ask you a very quick question around the data? You talked about data quite a bit, and we understand that India is an ocean of big data. How can a New Zealand company leverage this, as you today understand that data could be a new oil? So how do we use that and leverage that?
I'm obviously a bit biased because my other company is Data Insight and we work with data. But it really is, I guess, about creating value and a moat, because if your solution is purely technology, that's not necessarily defendable in India or in other locations, where it's replicable. So I guess when you think about what we're doing is, these lenders are doing such vast volumes and we're digitizing that process. It's just insane, the volume. One lender's doing 90,000 valuations a month, completely manually. And so digitizing that process, capturing the data electronically, and actually being able to give that back to them, to give them insights of how the market is performing, is absolutely game changing. And I guess the really exciting part of it, so they can actually make data driven decisions as they're growing the economy. So really exciting. And I guess, each bank could build their own connectivity and their own platform, but the value is actually as we bring on the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and multiple lenders as we are. And that's when it is, the whole market of data.
All right, thank you so much. Now, I understand that Simon Bridges has got prior appointments and needs to leave now. So we just want to put a round of applause and give a memento to him before he leaves.
Thanks so much. Sorry about that. It's just a busy old day.
Okay, so we're going to open this forum to anybody to ask any relevant questions if they have, before we wrap up this final third session for this summit. We got time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. Maori, are you there?
This is a question for Joe. Joe, you definitely have an inspiring entrepreneurial story. And just under 8 years, 3,600 designs, 4 locations, 31 countries. You shared with us about being strong, persevere, partner, and communicate. What I need to understand, it is what is your personal success habit? Thank you.
Wow. Personal success habit. I guess it's communication. I teach my staff and my partners and my colleagues the importance of communication because, being in isolated offices, we're in New Zealand, we're 17 hours away, we work round the clock. It's really important to make sure that the lines of communications are open and are strong. I think, I do work round the clock as well. I'm up at 5:30 every morning and my last call's around about 10 o'clock at night. So, and then I'm still have the Middle East working around that time as well. So I guess habit is communication, but also rest as well when you can get it. Being on the plane and travelling a lot, you have to make sure that you replenish yourself and take good care of yourself when you're travelling so much. So those are my 2 habits really, and also spending as much time as you can with your family when you are back on base. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions from that end there? Or this end or this end? Yeah. All right. Then it opens for more questions from my side. So, Mr. DAVAR, I just wanted to talk to you about that ease of doing India. Recently, I've come across a news which said that India has made 20 points growth recently, like I think a couple of weeks ago. And Mr. Modi's vision of being under 50 top-ranking countries in the world to be in the ease of doing India. What are your thoughts about that?
Infrastructure is the game changer. Mr. Modi is quite clear in what he wants and what his government of the day is expecting. The idea of informal economy getting away and more electronic data being transferred to customs, less of face-to-face communication with people reduces informal economy, and that is ease of doing business in India. Now, the customs, as I mentioned, is connected on net, and you can get your customs documents filed in minutes. It's all possible with this new government, with giving that ease of doing business to the customers.
Thank you, Zubin. Carmen, can I ask you one last question before we finish this conversation, this session today? The specific issue that you raised about meeting those banks in India and try to convince somebody from overseas to come along and talk about their mortgage or the systems that you're trying to sell them. India cooperative banks have been through a major recent change, and there has been quite a bit of merger and acquisition on the road now, where they're looking at merging some of the small cooperative banks into one large or 2 large cooperative banks. How do you see your company or overseas brand like New Zealand brand to penetrate that and look at that as an opportunity for you?
Yeah, it is an opportunity because I guess if you look at other markets, New Zealand, we've got 4 big banks that have close to 90% market share. Australia, you have exactly the same. Singapore, you've got 3 big banks and we're working with them. So I guess the exciting thing about India is the size and the volume of the lenders. And yes, there has been some merger and acquisitions, but all it's done is actually create more big lenders in our pipeline. So it's actually quite exciting for us. And as part of that, there has been the mandate of digitization innovation and using technology, and also moving to global best practice, which is what we're providing. So it only makes it more exciting for us in terms of the market. I think, in terms of ease of doing business, there's still complexities to working with India. It took us about 9 months to get a company number set up a company in India. It took us many, many, many months to open up a bank account. So I think, in terms of what could be done to bring closer relations is certainly some of those administrational burdens where you have markets like Singapore wooing us to come, Dubai, Hong Kong, Japan, going open up here, we'll give you tax breaks and make it easy for you. So I think there's a way to go on that side. But I think culturally, you can't actually compare the openness of India to welcome new business from overseas. And I really noticed that. I had a trip to China where got to meet, Steve Wozniak and Alibaba and amazing businesses. But there wasn't the sense of come to China and that openness that there is in India, where they are open for business. They do embrace cultural diversity, and they're very happy to hear what you have to say. So I'd really encourage everybody to go.
I've got a question from the panel here.
I've got a question for Carmen again now. Basically, because of my previous banking background, I was keen about understanding when you are a technology company from a smaller market like New Zealand, and generally when you go and meet any of the bigger banks in India, the scale of expectation on delivery and also the timelines are quite challenging. So how did you really meet the challenges in terms of transitioning that delivery of scale and the timelines? Of course, they are a bit flexible. They're not very rigid on the timelines, but they do understand the challenges on the other side. That's a good thing that I've seen. But how did you really meet up on those challenges?
Yeah, you're right. That's a really good question. And it was a little bit intimidating. You get to meet the CEO of these massive banks, and they've got more customers than we have people. And, they're doing 90,000 valuations a month, and we haven't done, we have 100,000 sales a year. And I guess it was really recognizing and backing yourself. And it was the same in New Zealand when we launched, and we're going, wow, it's cloud, it's digital. And, and the key decision, it's going to change, transform your business. And the key decision maker is the chief risk officer, and they're deciding billions of dollars every day, and this is business critical. So you could have said, how are you going to do that, and how are you going to get a nationwide panel of valuers in New Zealand when you've got no banks, and how are you going to get banks when you've got no valuers, how are you going to build an automated valuation model when you've got no data? So we had to work with over 70 different councils. There was a monopoly in the market. So I suppose it's actually going front on with these challenges, going, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And for India, the size of the prize, so Honorary Simon Bridges said it's an elephant. It's an elephant. So I suppose as an entrepreneur and mother of four, if I'm going to go somewhere, I may as well go big or go home. So I'm in India. And but how do we get, we actually sell it that we've processed over $500 billion of lending decisions through the platform, which is not that much to them, and really selling them that it's proven, and now we're localizing it, and really saying we understand their market and taking the time to bring the local people and building our local team. So actually showing them that they're getting the best of both. But you're right, the scale is phenomenal. And I remember saying to my CTO, well, you said it was going to scale, and now I'm choosing this enormous elephant to scale. So I guess we built the platform. From day one, we were building world class, and we always knew we were going global. And so it's quite an honor to take Kiwi tech to the world, and especially to India. So yeah, we're fine. It's scalable.
Fantastic. Pushpa here?
Yeah, I'm just intrigued. I just heard contradictory things on the panel. On one hand, especially Zubin, you said to minimize or to some extent totally root out informal economy, the focus is on digitizing, automating, and making it machine-based. On the other hand, we're also talking about if you really want to make an impact or go and work in India and be successful, it has to be building relationships, person to person, people to people, right? How are those two going to survive in long term?
The informal economy is directed more towards the government organizations, more towards associations which give permissions and requisites. That has been taken off, and the idea of GST, the idea of removing all the other bottlenecks is the task taken over by Mr. Modi and his government. It will take its time. Honestly, given the 1 billion plus population, it does take time, but must mention in the 6 years that he has been in power, the things have improved. For us, I lived in Mumbai. I did not see 200 plus kilometers being built every day. However, the facts and the matter stays. The roads are being built, are being constructed all throughout the country. So you may not see it immediately, but the roots that are being sowed by the Modi government are definitely going to be powerful for businesses to flourish in future.
Pushpa, just 1 second. Just wanted to make an announcement that there will be a fire drill in 2 minutes. It's just drill, so don't leave. Sorry.
Am I right in assuming in that case that the reforms that are being made are process reforms that are actually going to improve the person-to-person relationship which is needed for any business to be successful?
The person-to-person connect in any business will remain. That is not going to be taken out of this equation. On the contrary, the Indian businesses will flourish the more person-to-person contact. What reference I'm making is the economy policies, the informal economy where you need to take care of interests of the government employees. That does not exist, or it's being tried to mitigate. You do not have to face the customs. Earlier, most of the customers who imported or exported out of India had to meet up with customs once a month. Not anymore. You do not need to face the customs. You do not need to meet the airlines, shipping lines, or any regulatory bodies which control the informal economy. So with digitization, all this has been mitigated. And of course, India is improving. It takes its own time, but we are getting there.
All right. Is there any, can we take one more question from the members? All right. On that basis, I just want to say thank you, everyone. We're going to wrap this here. I'll hand it over to our MC, Mr. Dev Nadkarni.
Well, fantastic champions this panel has been for India. Let's give them a hand. We're a little bit early, so that gives me some time to make some observations. Honorable Simon Ridges is not here, but he talked about the kiwi and the elephant again as just we got to look at how we're going to make them tango. He also talked about sporting. He talked about cricket. And yes, cricket's been the common factor for both countries for many years. But if you noticed, NBA, as the National Basketball Association, has just made an entry into India, and they had their first match in Mumbai. There's no reason why rugby can't make, yes. And that will be so much more to share for the two countries. Liz, thank you for talking about shared values. There is, as an Indian living in New Zealand for close to 2 decades and having had a little bit of contact with Maori and Pacific Island people, I see that there's so much to share between our cultures. There's so much common. Thank you for that. One of the heartening things to listen from ZUBIN's presentation, which came repeatedly, and every time I heard it, it was so nice to hear, and that was, it can be done in India. Almost after every slide, you said, it can be done in India. That was great. Now, those are the sorts of things which help dispel some of the bad press that India has been historically getting for so many decades. Carmen talked about India growing to be the size of Europe. And India is all about statistics and mind-boggling statistics. And yes, India has grown to be the size of Europe. And I suspect one of the reasons for that is India did its own Brexit in 1947. May I now request Jay to give out the mementos, please? One more round of applause, please.